All right, my true crime fans, it's been a little while since we did a live stream, so we figured what better case could we do a live stream than the Gilgo Beach murders. And I really wanted to dive deep into the affidavit. Now, this is a long affidavit, so bear with me. It's the first time I'm looking at it, so I figured I would do it with you folks. But if you've got some questions, by all means, let me know what those questions are in the chat, and I will definitely answer them for you. I do have a video coming out that I'll work on tonight after doing the live stream that will come out on Wednesday, just giving our thoughts and a little bit of background on the case, and I'll start there. I will also kind of hit on some of the other things as well, like Brian Koberger and what's going on with that, and talk a little bit about Richard Allen. I know there hasn't been huge updates by any means, but we'll kind of take a look at some of that stuff as well. So let's get cracking here. I'm just going to do a quick transition, and we are going to take a look at what we've got going on here. So obviously big breaking news right now with Rex Heuermann being the potential serial killer for the Gilgo Beach murders that essentially happened back in 2010, or as far back as we know as 2007, based off of the victims that went missing. Okay, and you'll kind of see that right here. I think like they're talking about Melissa Barthelemy in 2009, but she was not the first person that went missing. She was one of the people that was found on December 10th. Right here, you'll see that they're talking about the 2007 disappearance of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. So that's why I say back to 2007. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this case, obviously. So pretty interesting stuff. So let's just jump into the arrest affidavit, because this is going to be kind of a long thing that we want to look at. Now, I won't go line for line, but there is some things in here that we want to look at together and really kind of decide, like, is there something going on with this? Is there a chance that he's going to be found guilty? Is there a chance he's going to be found innocent? Keep in mind, before it goes to court, we know that everybody is innocent until proven guilty, but we will put our opinions in here. So it basically starts off like any other affidavit would. It's got his charges here. So he's got 3 murders in the first degree. And you'll see Amber Costello, Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy. Where you don't see is the first person that we were talking about back in 2007, which was Maureen Brainerd Barnes. But I think we are going to see that at some point. Now, we don't know if, or what we've been told is that the person they were looking for was actually a lady named Shannon, and she is not connected to the case. But was also found in and around the area. So I'll be curious to see if that, somehow she ties back to the case. And then the other thing that I find pretty interesting, if you're looking up here, is at least 10 sets of human remains have been found in this area. And now they haven't all been tied back to this case. So the question would become, are they going to end up being tied back to it, and we've just got enough evidence to proceed with the 3 that are named in this case? And are we going to see more later, which is a very real possibility? Obviously, if your authorities, that's something that you may want to do just to get somebody behind bars in the interest of public safety. There's been a lot of criticism of police for how long that this case took to, I don't want to say solve, because it's not solved yet, but to find a suspect in it. So would that get them to get somebody arrested and then move forward? Possibly. So let's take a look at some of this stuff. So as described below, based on the serious, heinous nature of these serial murders, the planning and forethought went into crimes, the strength of the people's case, the length of the incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extended period of time that this defendant was able to avoid apprehension, his recent searches for sadistic materials, child pornography, images of the victims and their relatives, counter surveillance conducted online as to the criminal investigation, his use of fictitious names, burner email and cell phone accounts, and his access to history of possessing firearms. The only means to ensure defendant Rex A. Heuermann's return to court is to remand him without bail. Okay, Now, this is going to go in and kind of talk about the discovery of the victims here. And we've kind of hit that, and you'll see that in my video. I talk about the timelines here, so I'm not going to hit this too hard, but we do want to, essentially hit, like, why were they out there? Why were they looking for this? And you're going to see this in the arrest affidavit, and then you'll see where they're finding the bodies, which is crazy. So you got Maureen Brainerd Barnes, you've got Megan Waterman, you have Amber Costello, and then Melissa Barthélemy, who were all found on the day that they were going out to look for Shannon. So that is an interesting fact, because if they were never going out there to look for Shannon, they wouldn't have found these other bodies. Now, a couple other things that you're seeing in here is some of the consistencies of the victims, and this is how the detectives came up with this could be a serial killer. Right? So 22 to 27 years old, they were all petite females and believed to be working as sex workers. All had missing clothing and personal possessions, and all had been killed by homicide. All had contact shortly before their disappearance with a person using a cell phone burner, quote unquote, right? So for anybody that doesn't know what a burner is, I'm sure you all do. But it's going to be a phone that you can go pick up at Walmart. You can go to a cell phone store and basically use it as a one-time use, or it's a prepaid phone is essentially what it is, right? It doesn't tie to your name, anything like that. Back in 2010, it would have been a heck of a lot easier to get it because they wouldn't provide any personal information. I think it's a little bit harder now, or at least when I was leaving Verizon in my previous days, we made it a little bit harder for people to get them. They would have to produce some sort of ID, but it was still pretty easy to get, right? And this is some of the information that you're seeing in the arrest affidavit. So pretty interesting stuff. In January 2022, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office assigned an experienced team of investigators. So keep in mind, this is 12 years later. Part of the criticism that the police force took for this one, but essentially prosecutors to work jointly with law enforcement partners, essentially a comprehensive review of every item of evidence and information in this investigation was undertaken by the team. On March 14th, 2022, approximately 2 months into the renewed joint investigation, this comprehensive review led to a discovery of a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche that was registered to defendant Rex A. Heuermann at the time of these murders. Okay? Pretty interesting stuff. As described below, this was significant because a witness to the disappearance of Amber Costello identified a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche as the vehicle believed to have been driven by her killer. Okay, so keep in mind, there was a lot of Avalanche back in those days, 2010. Probably, I would say, anywhere from 2001, 2002 to probably to 2013, 2014. It was probably pretty common you'd see an Avalanche on the road, but that was a good fact from the person that was with Amber Costello to point that out. And it is interesting that that Mr. Heuermann owned one at that time as well. The discovery led to a comprehensive investigation of defendant Heuermann, which consisted of over 300 subpoenas, search warrants, and other legal processes to obtain evidence. As discussed more fully below, among the items uncovered were cell phone billing records for defendant Heuermann, corresponding to the cell locations for one, the burner cell phones used to arrange meetings with 3 of the 4 victims, the taunting calls made to a relative of Miss Barthélemy, a call made by detectives to Miss Barthélemy's cell phone while looking into her disappearance, calls checking voicemail on Miss Bernard Barnes' cell phone after her disappearance, and then calls checking voicemails on Miss Bernard Barnes' cell phone after her disappearance. In addition, Heuermann lived in Massapequa Park, where the victims were believed to have disappeared from. So a lot of stuff is pointing his way. Again, nothing really smoking gun here, but you are probably going to see in the rest of the affidavit some more of the stuff that is going to point towards him. But you can see that it looks like they were kind of onto him early, but didn't really pursue at that point. I guess we'll see here in just a little bit if that makes sense or not. The disappearance and murder. So each one of these, we're not going to hit one of these because these are in some of my video, some of the stuff. So we're going to bypass. This is the individual killings of each one of the victims. So if you want to take a look at that, definitely take a look at that. This one I think is going to be the most important, which is going to be, well, let me rephrase that. All of them are very important. I think this portion of the case is going to be the most important because somebody saw her leaving her residence and getting into that avalanche. So I will read this one out. Amber Costello was last seen alive on September 2nd, 2010, leaving her residence at 112 American Avenue in West Babylon during the late evening hours. At this time, she was believed to be working as a sex worker. On September 1st, 2010, the day prior to her disappearance of Amber Costello, Ms. Costello's cell phone was contacted by a burner cell phone. On September 1st, 2010, this burner cell phone had communications with the Costello phone at approximately 11:33 p.m. and 11:34. During those communications, the burner cell phone contacted the two cell site towers in West Amityville and Massapequa Park. Thereafter, the burner cell phone traveled to West Babylon in proximity to the residence of Amber Costello and had contact with the Costello phone at approximately 12:05. According to witnesses around the time of these communications between the burner cell phone and the Costello phone on September 1st and 2nd, 2010, a prostitution client showed up at Miss Costello's residence located in West Babylon, New York. After the client entered the home, a ruse was executed on the client whereby a person pretended to be outraged boyfriend of Amber Costello and the client left from the residence. While Amber Costello retained the money the client had bought to pay for her services, based upon interviews, that client was described as a large white male, approximately 6'4" to 6'6" in height, in his mid-40s with dark bushy hair and big oval-style 1970s type eyeglasses. A witness described him to police as appearing like an ogre. Okay, so we've talked about that a little bit in the video that's coming up. Ogre. Crazy, right? So I'm not going to go through all of this, but pretty crazy stuff going on here. It's pretty interesting to see that some people may have seen him, and it's interesting that it took as long as it did to get here. So this is pretty interesting that I kind of want to see. Significantly, travel records show that on July 8th, 2009, defendant Huerman's wife departed the United States for Iceland. On August 18th, 2009, defendant Huerman's wife returned to the United States. Consequently, defendant Huerman's wife was out of the country during the time of Melissa Barthelomew's disappearance. So, I asked this question early on here, and I also asked it in my video. Do you think that his wife was involved if Mr. Huerman is the potential suspect or ends up being convicted of the crime? I would say based off of his wife leaving the country, probably not, but it would make for some interesting conversations based off some of the DNA that were found on the bodies, i.e. some of the hairs that we've heard in the news. Haven't seen it in the affidavit yet, right? Because we haven't went through the affidavit, but we've heard it in the news, so we can only assume that somebody did their due diligence to see some of this stuff. Based upon cellular telephone billing records on August 28, 2010, the cellular telephone subscribed to by defendant Huerman's wife traveled from New York to New Jersey on September 5th. The cellular telephone subscribed to by his wife returned to New York from New Jersey. Consequently, the cellular telephone subscribed to by defendant Huerman's wife was out of the New York State during the time of Amber Costello's disappearance. Cellular billing records for the cell phone. During the times of the disappearance and murders of the victims, defendant Huerman owned an architectural business located in Midtown Manhattan, and this business was the named subscriber of Huerman's cell phone, which was active during the times of the victim's disappearance, and subscribed to Huerman's cell phone, which was active during the times of the victim's disappearance. We just said that, but that's okay. Although cell site records from that time period no longer existed, investigators obtained cellular billing records which showed general location information for Huerman's phone. So keep that in mind when they go to court. They're not going to have exact pings. It's not going to be like Law and Order where you have somebody walk in and say, hey, yeah, they were on this block, with an error margin of 2 or 3 houses. It's saying right here they do not have those records anymore, but based off of the billing records, they can kind of tie it back there. So this will be interesting in court, and I would love to hear from you folks. would a good lawyer be able to explain this away? I think they would. So far, through the first 9 pages, we haven't really seen any smoking gun evidence. I would say a lot of things are pointing towards Rex Heuermann, no question about that. I think it's going to come down to that eyewitness, and I also think it's going to be interesting if they find the avalanche to see, is it going to be the same color, and how are the lawyers going to get over that one? I know if I was a lawyer, I would want to have whoever pinpointed that avalanche show me what color it was, so that way I could either dispute that in court, or I could prove in court that there's 150,000 of that specific color made, or whatever the case is. So that being said, that could give reasonable doubt to a jury up until this point, right? So let's keep on going. This is all cell phone stuff. I'm not going to hit this too much, but you're basically, what they're saying in this is that during most of these disappearances, you're going to see cell phone show a call to locations, and you're also going to see that cell phones were used to kind of pester some of the family members, which is pretty interesting. And then you also saw that his wife left the country and then came back. And then a lot of this burner phone, had activity in and around the area where these females go missing. So pretty interesting stuff. Cell site records indicate that the burner cell phone had activity in New York City. That's a pretty wide variety of places, but specifically attached to a cellular tower located in 19 West 34th Street, which is approximately 872 feet or 0.16 miles from Heuermann's then office space. Okay, so again, there's a margin of error when you're doing cell phone pings. It'd be pretty interesting to see how this is going to come back into court. Very specific stuff in here. Obviously, this is going to help the prosecution for sure. I think this diagram right here, when you're looking at this, is probably going to be, telling you a lot of stuff of where that ping is. But they still have to tie that phone back to Rex and do a good job of that, right? Because it's a burner phone, it might be a little bit easier for the defense attorney to kind of talk that through. Not saying that they'll be able to do that, but there's a lot of stuff going on in this case. On August 5th, 2009, between approximately 6:50 and 7:11 p.m., a male caller used the Barthélemy phone to contact Miss Barthélemy's family. During said time period, the Barthélemy phone utilized the following cell phone towers, right? So this is going to be pretty important because now we're using the phone of the victim to call the victim's family on the same date during a similar time frame between 6:46 and 7:05. Heuermann's cell phone listed billing locations in New York City. So this is probably the first piece of evidence that might pique a jury's interest. If you're looking at this right here, you're basically saying, hey, not only does the victim's phone end up in the same area that the Heuermann's phone, I can't even say Rex Heuermann's name right anymore, and right around the same time. Now, keep in mind what we're seeing, and this is will kind of play on the emotions of the jury a little bit, is that they're using the phone, the victim's phone, to call the victim's family, right? Now, one could argue that there's a huge amount of population in New York City, and even in this area, you can see it's pretty dense population right here. Now, is it likely to be Rex Heuermann that is making these calls? And can you tie that together? Yeah. As a good defense lawyer, I would like to see how many other people were within that margin of error on those cell phone / billing pings that were making phone calls right around the same time, or their cell phones were in the area. Now, based off of that, you could peel that onion back and see how many of them owned an avalanche, how many of them were over 6 feet tall, how many of them were Caucasian, and start working that back as a defense lawyer to really talk through, like, could they prove that wasn't Rex? Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't Rex. I'm not saying it was Rex. I'm just saying from a lawyer's perspective, these are the things that they're going to get to work on very quickly to try to disprove some of the things that are going on in this affidavit right now. I will say my own personal opinion, and this is my opinion only. My opinion really doesn't matter in the case, as I am not legal counsel, so take it for what it is. The evidence is pointing towards Rex Heuermann, no question. I'm just talking through some of the things that could put some doubt into a jury, depending on what type of jury and how the case is presented, both from the prosecution and from the defense perspective. All right. We won't get this because this is basically going back into the specifics of when the calls were made from the Barthélemy phone to the Barthélemy family. But if you do want to get into that, it's page 15 on the arrest affidavit, and you're going to see some other things that are popping up over here, right? On August 26, between approximately 11:29 and 11:34 a.m., a mail caller used the Barthélemy phone to contact Miss Barthélemy's family. According to cell site records, the Barthélemy phone was located in New York City at this time, specifically attached to the cellular tower located at 4 Penn Plaza, which is approximately 2,230 feet or 0.42 miles from Huerman's then office space. So one thing I will note right here, is it coincidence that it ends up being in that same area? Again, I told you what my opinion is, but a good lawyer could say this is getting further and further away every time we see that the phone call is being made, and a good lawyer is also going to try to figure out what is the dense population for that area, right? How many people live in that area, and again, could compare how many cell phones were in that area that were close to that within that margin during that time, or aka / multiple times, to be able to disprove what's going on here. Not saying that they would be able to do that, because obviously the prosecution could come back and they're going to hit some things that I think we're going to see down here, but this would be good for a defense lawyer to really go after to disprove. Again, would it give reasonable doubt to a juror? You just don't know. You really don't. I just sat through jury duty myself recently. Part of the reason why I haven't been on as much, took like a couple of days of my time, and then just work, that kind of stuff. But I will tell you that there was definitely different perspectives that were in that courtroom, right? And you just never know. When it goes to a jury, you just never know. Again, a lot of evidence pointing towards Rex, but it's hard to say, right? Hard to say. All right, additional burner phones and online account activity linked to the defendant. So, as described herein, over the course of the comprehensive investigation of defendant Huerman, investigators located a number of online accounts and burner cell phones linked to defendant Huerman, but which were held by him in fictitious names and used for illicit activities. American Express records obtained via subpoena revealed reoccurring Google Pay payments made by defendant Huerman to Tinder, an online dating and geosocial networking application used to find dates or hookups within a user's immediate vicinity. So I'm going to stop there, okay? So first and foremost, we are talking about a case that could have started prior to 2007. Okay, the first victim that was found in Gilgo Beach in December 2010 was somebody that went missing in 2007. Now, could there be other victims prior to 2007? Absolutely. We've heard in this affidavit that most of these victims were assumed to be contacted via Craigslist. Now, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, Tinder did not exist back in 2010. So this piece of information right here, I think, would be a great piece of information for a prosecutor to be able to say, hey, we can show a pattern, but a good defense attorney is going to have that whole thing thrown out, because if Tinder didn't exist back then, what relevance would it have to a case that victims went missing back in 2010? Now, I could be wrong, but let's take a quick look. When was Tinder created? So you can see that right here. Tinder was created September 12th, 2012. So going back here, this right here is going to get thrown out, right? There's just no way that a defense attorney is going to let that happen. So all of this stuff here is probably never going to make it into a courtroom. It'll be in the affidavit, which is fine, but it's never going to get in front of a jury. So keep that in mind. We're still going to talk about it, but I don't think you'll ever see this. A good defense attorney is going to make sure that this doesn't even show up. They're probably already wiping this pre-court, pre-trial, pre-jury. It's already all going to be wiped, but let's keep talking through it. Records were then obtained from Tinder, which revealed that the Tinder profile was set up in the name Andy. Huerman's middle name is Andrew, with links to a burner cell phone, subscribed in the fictitious name of Andrew Roberts using an email account. The account, and keep in mind there's some redacted stuff in here that we don't know, could be important, was established with AOL on January 15, 2011 in the fictitious name John Springfield with the Astoria, Queens, New York zip code using another burner cell phone, which records show has no named subscriber. Records obtained from Verizon showed that defendant Huerman's cell phone was used on December 11, 2022 for a period of over 3 hours to access these fictitious AOL accounts. Now, there's not plural there, but it is plural. Similarly, records obtained from T-Mobile show that burner's cell phone was used on multiple dates, including November 8, 2022, to access this account. A review of call records for these two additional burner cell phones revealed that both cell phones were used extensively between 2021 and 2023 for prostitution-related contacts, either with sex workers or massage parlors. In addition, cell site warrants for these burner cell phones revealed that just like the burner cell phones defendant Huerman used to contact the victims prior to their disappearance, these additional burner cell phones had frequent cell site activity in Midtown Manhattan. Okay? So let's just slow that down for a second. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Now, what I'm thinking what they're trying to do here, and I could be wrong, because we haven't read through this. Keep in mind, this is my first time looking at this, so bear with me. What they're probably trying to do is going to try to tie this back to, based off of what his activities have been recently, we are going to be able to prove that he knew what he was doing with burner phones back in 2010, right? That's the only thing I could see going on here, because everything else that you're seeing in this arrest affidavit that's tying to murder in the first and murder in the second for all three of the victims that were stated at the start of this affidavit is that these burner phone behaviors is going to tie back to what happened when they died, because we've already established Tinder started in 2012, 2 years after the bodies were found, so that's going to have zero relevance on what's going on with the case once it's presented in court, unless another possibility is the other victims, right? Because we've seen that there was up to 10 victims that you saw in this affidavit, right? And there's rumors that there's more if you listen to the media. But in this affidavit, it specifically says 10 on the first page. Are they trying to set it up that if they come with more charges, that they're going to be able to tie these two back to each other? That's the question. Is it possible? I don't know. Pretty interesting stuff. So let's keep going. Legal process is served on Google seeking records or accounts associated with the device. Identifiers of these additional burner cell phones revealed a connection to yet another burner or junk email account, namely, and then it's redacted. Okay. The account was subscribed in the fictitious name Thomas Hawk. A search warrant revealed that the email account associated with burner cell phone was used to conduct thousands of searches related to sex workers, sadistic, torture-related pornography, and child pornography, including all of this stuff that's redacted. Now, I think that's going to be pretty important, but I think more charges will be laid at some point. Yeah, so Craigslist, if you go back and you look to some of the similarities of the girls that were found, specifically the four, they were... It is thought by authorities that they were contacted via Craigslist. So back in like 2010, they're comparing it to, in the affidavit, to like Tinder and some of the other dating sites. But back in 2010, Craigslist was known very similar to like Backpage to have prostitution rings on there. And when they were putting the case together, they were saying that some of the similarities were that these ladies could have potentially been contacted on Craigslist for that first initial meeting. So interesting stuff for sure. This, I think, will have some tie back to it. The email account was also used to conduct in excess of 200 searches between 2022 and 2023 related to active and known serial killers, the specific disappearance and murders of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, aka the Gilgo 4 that you've seen. And for whatever reason, like I said, I don't know why there's only 3 that are being charged here, but that's is what it is, and the investigation in their murders. And then obviously you see a lot of redacted stuff here. So the question is going to be, how does that tie back? What is that going to look like? Very interested to see what that all looks like. Search warrant conducted on the fictitious and then redacted name AOL account further revealed selfie photographs that appeared to have been taken by defendant Rex Heuermann of himself, see below, and sent to other persons to solicit and arrange for sexual activity, further linking Heuermann to fictitious email accounts and burner cell phone used to establish the account. And then they have his picture there. Keep in mind, this is all in the arrest affidavit. That was page 21. If you folks want to look at the affidavit yourself, or if I'm going too fast, you can always ask to slow down. I'll slow down for you. Or if you want me to go faster, I can go faster as well. Defendant Rex A. Heuermann was further linked to a burner cell phone because on May 19, 2023, defendant Heuermann was observed by law enforcement via video and field surveillance at a cell phone store in Midtown Manhattan and purchased additional minutes which were added to this burner cell phone. So again, like we were talking about earlier, obviously it's a prepaid phone. He's going in to get prepaid stuff. Again, this is going to be a tough one. It just doesn't... it's not smoking gun information, right? A lot of the stuff is, how does it tie back to this case? Do I think other charges could be filed based off of the redacted information and some of the stuff they found? Absolutely. Do I think child pornography could be laid based off of what they said here, depending on what was found and on what devices? Absolutely. And maybe that's their secondary approach to go after. The burner thing, I just haven't seen the tie to it yet back to the original case yet. So we'll keep going. If you've seen or heard anything, just let me know. Write a comment down. How do you think that it ties back into it? To me, it's 2 different time periods, utilizing 2 different types of technology. Some of them obviously being from prior 2010, like AOL, things like that. Different types of websites that were out there versus like Tinder. Now we see Tinder come up a lot, and then how burner cell phones were accessible in the early 2000s versus mid 2010s to even now is a lot different than what it was in, say, early 2004. Right, but let's keep going. Analysis of the AOL account also led to the discovery of another email account used on February 14th, 2021 to send an image of a prostitute from upstate New York between 2 of Heuermann's secret email accounts. Further investigation revealed that the Google account was created on February 14th, 2021 using burner cell phone as a user's phone number and SMS, which is text message recovery number, and subscribed in the fictitious name Andy Roberts. So this is like name number 3. The same fake name linked to the target Tinder profile and burner cell phone, as well as the same alias utilized by defendant Heuermann in communications with numerous potential sex partners responding to his advertisements for sex, and the fictitious birthday of August 6, 1972. Which corresponds with the digital ending of the burner account. In addition, Google provided IP address information for the user's acceptance of the terms of service, which revealed that the terms of service were accepted on February 14, 2021 from IP address redacted. Significantly, records were obtained from Altice doing business as Optimum, which is an internet service provider, indicating that the IP address at defendant Heuermann's address was also, and then it's redacted. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna keep moving down because we're talking a lot about. Well, actually, let's hit this right here. So, moreover, based on SCPD records of the official website, GilgoNews.com, a website maintained by the SCPD to disperse news pertaining to this investigation, defendant Heuermann's home IP address was used on May 23, 2020 and July 3rd, 2020 to access the official news concerning this investigation. So I'm going to stop there for a second and just kind of give you a little bit of my feedback so far. Again, a lot of stuff going on here that's pretty crazy. And I'm going to scroll to the DNA analysis, okay? Up to this point, up to the DNA analysis, there's nothing really that's smoking gun that's going on with the cell phone burners, the email accounts, the contact of the victims' families, or even, looking at news sites. Look, there's no question. I look at news sites all the time. There's probably 10 or 15 cases that I'm looking at constantly, both in the U.S. and Canada. And, at the end of the day, if you were to look at my internet history, you'd probably say, well, you're obsessed with some of these. That'd be what a lawyer would say to a potential jury, is that Rex Heuermann was obsessed with the case. Now, things that are abnormal or are not normal, were definitely things that were happening through the affidavit that we heard of. And, obviously having fake email accounts and doing Google Pay and having burner phones, not illegal. None of that stuff's illegal, but probably not normal everyday people type stuff to do. And then to do that with sex workers and whatever images that were there, that's all abnormal stuff. And that's all stuff that could be charges laid at a later date that would be illegal, aka like the child pornography stuff that I think we'll see later on, depending on what was found and on what devices were found. This is something that they might be able to get them for. And hey, maybe that's a backup play. Maybe it's if a jury doesn't convict them on the murders of these victims, they can go after some of the other stuff that they found, because there's definitely some concerning trends and some concerning things that are happening in there. Again, though, the burner phones, the aliases, and the email addresses, otherwise, unless they were used in the illegal activity, right? So if he used any of those for some of the child pornography or the sadistic stuff, then yes, that would be illegal at that point. But if he didn't, then it wouldn't be. Oh, here we go. Here comes the Dobie. He wants to say hi. You say hi, Dobie? Oh, you say hi? So up to this point, for the DNA stuff, I just don't see any smoking gun stuff. Does it sound like he wasn't a good person? Absolutely. Does it sound like there's some things he needs to be charged for? Absolutely. My opinion says that everything is pointing his way. I just don't know if up to this point in the affidavit, if that's going to be. Now, we are going to get into the DNA analysis, and this may be the smoking gun, right? And for any true crime fan, you can say, well, really in true crime, is there ever a smoking gun? There's not. There really isn't. It's not like Law and Order or what you see on TV, right? There's got to be multiple sources and multiple pieces of evidence that point that way. And then you have to have a jury that's going to convict with that beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Now, up to this point, would I have some reasonable doubt or would I have some questions? I absolutely would. If I was on that jury, I'd have some questions. Now, this DNA stuff could change all of that. So we're going to talk about it. Now, as you can see, a lot of it's redacted, but you're going to see a lot of pages because, again, this is a huge arrest affidavit. So let's keep going. DNA analysis of hairs recovered from the examination of the victims' bodies. During the course of this investigation, each of the 4 victims' bodies were examined by a forensic scientist with the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory, and all of this was redacted. Okay? But Forensic Laboratory 1 was able to determine that each of the aforementioned female hairs recovered on the 3 victims each belonged to a female individual in mitochondrial haplogroup K1C2. I have no idea what that is. I'm not a scientist, so I probably butchered that, but that's okay. And that this female was not any of the victims. So basically, what I'm getting out of this is it was somebody else's hair. Now, if you read that article that I was reading earlier from CNN, they do let the cat out of the bag and say that Heuermann's wife's hair was found on some of the victims. So we'll just assume that's what it's going to say in here, but we're going to read through it just to confirm. But on or about July 21st, 2022, an undercover SCPD detective recovered 11 bottles from a trash receptacle that had been left out for collection in front of the residence of defendant Rex A. Heuermann. The Suffolk County Crime Laboratory took swabs of said bottle, which were subsequently sent to Forensic Laboratory 1 for DNA profiling. Based on these new submissions, on or about February 24th, 2023, Forensic Laboratory Number 1 was able to conclude that one of the DNA profiles generated from the aforementioned bottles taken from defendant Humerman's residence indicated a female individual belonging to, I'm not going to try to say that again, but the original DNA sample, which is the same, again, I'm not going to try to say that again, as the female hairs recovered from the 3 victims. So this is where we say that Humerman's wife hair was found. Now keep in mind, go back to the arrest affidavit when we go to page 4 or 5, it does state that Humerman's wife was out of town for that first victim and was in Iceland for that entire period, and that has been confirmed. So I do ask in my video, and I did ask here, do you think that Humerman's wife was involved? Do you think that she had any knowledge of it? Or do you think that it was just a simple DNA transfer because they lived together? I would like to hear from you folks. Tell me down below. What do we think, right? All right, Forensic Laboratory Number 2, on or about March 23rd, 2023, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory requested Forensic Laboratory Number 2, a lab specializing in forensic mitochondrial analysis, to conduct additional independent analysis. On or about June 12, 2023, Forensic Laboratory 2 issued a report concluding that the DNA sample from the female recovered from the bottles outside the residence of the defendant Humerman, i.e. Humerman's wife, so that's the first time we've seen that, but it does go back to the CNN story that we were reading earlier, are the same at all compared positions common to and between samples, specifically at a rate that would, as per EMPOP database, exclude 99.98% of the North American population. That's crazy. Okay, some disclaimers down here, but 99.98. Now, again, does that mean that there is some room? There's some room there. We'll give our opinions after this right here. Pretty interesting stuff, though, so far. Okay, Forensic Laboratory Number 2 then compared the profile associated with the DNA sample from Humerman's wife to one of the 2 aforementioned female hairs recovered on the remains of Miss Waterman, which also resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile are the same at all compared positions common to and between samples. That's crazy. That's crazy to me, but let's keep going. Let's keep going. Again, I ask, did his wife have anything to do with it? We'll just go from there. Based on the foregoing, while 99.98% of the North American population can be excluded from the female hair on Costello, and 99.69% of the North American population are excluded from the female hair on Waterman, it is significant that Humerman's wife cannot be excluded from either the female hairs recovered on the remains of Megan Waterman and Amber Costello. As previously noted, defendant Humerman's wife was out of state at the time of Miss Waterman and Miss Costello's disappearance and murders. Okay? Crazy. Just saying, so far crazy. This is a lot of reading. 37 pages. 37. It's a lot, right? Like more than the Richard Allen and the Brian Coburn case. Almost more than both of them combined. During the initial examination of Miss Waterman's skeletal remains and the burlap materials, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory was also able to recover a male hair from the bottom of the burlap used to wrap Miss Waterman by her killer. An initial examination of said hair revealed Caucasian European characteristics. However, the hair was unsuitable for further DNA analysis. At that time, by the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory, the hair was subsequently submitted for further DNA analysis, and on or about July 31st, 2020, Forensic Laboratory 1 was able to generate a DNA profile for the hair recovered on the bottom of the Waterman burlap. Specifically, Forensic Laboratory Number 1 determined this hair belonged to a male. Okay? Following the discovery of the Chevrolet Avalanche, which was registered to defendant Humerman, and the investigation of cellular billing records and other items on or about January 26, 2023, a surveillance team observed and recovered a pizza box thrown by defendant Rex A. Humerman into garbage and can be located 385 Fifth Avenue, Manhattan. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, we see that right there. Boom. You see the actual box. Isn't that crazy? We'll get to that. we'll get to that. The pizza box was sent to the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory for analysis, where a swab was taken from the leftover pizza crust. On or about March 23, 2023, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory sent the swab from the pizza crust abandoned by defendant Humerman to forensic laboratory. On or about April 28, 2023, a detective hand-delivered from the forensic laboratory a portion of male hair on Waterman to forensic laboratory for testing. On June 12, 2023, forensic laboratory was able to determine, as the male hair on Waterman and the swab from pizza crust, that the DNA profiles are the same, specifically at a rate of 99.96. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. We're going to go there. We're going to go to the arrest here in a second. Wow. If there's ever a smoking gun, I would say that's the smoking gun. Now, again, we'll talk a little bit about what a lawyer could do to try to get this thrown out, because, again, we don't even know if this is going to be presented to the jury. Now, everything that I've seen here so far would tell me that it would get presented to a jury. Now, what they're going to have to do is very similar to the Koberger case, right? Because the way that they obtained the DNA, not illegal by any means, but it could be something that gets thrown out depending on how they obtained it and how that DNA was handled from the trash can or even from the house, who threw it out, was it on surveillance, all of that stuff. That's all going to play a factor into the court case. Now, let's say that this piece of evidence does go in. I think what's going to happen is a good lawyer is going to be able to get the cell phone stuff thrown out, or at least most of it. I think they are going to be able to talk about some of the burner stuff and some of the accounts. And if it's a good lawyer and they don't introduce the wrong information, I think that that's where the prosecution is going to have a hard time making their case on that alone. Okay. This part here, what a good lawyer is going to have to try to do is have to try to get the DNA thrown out somehow. And somehow they're going to have to do that based off of the sample. Now, obviously, Rex Humerman's DNA was never in the database. They had to get it from the trash off of a pizza box. And that's very movie-like, right? And that's not illegal by any means, because he's throwing it in a public place in the trash. They can do that. So I'd love to hear from you folks. If you were a lawyer, right, because we can backseat law this, what would you do? How would you get this thrown out? And if you didn't get it thrown out, what are the chances that Rex Humerman gets off on this, right? This is not like the Koberger case where they're saying that this could be related to Rex. They are saying with 99%, almost 100% certainty that this is going to be Rex Humerman's DNA. The only other thing that I could see that could put a little twist in it, but I think would still get allowed into court, and I would love to see this one if they broadcast this, would be that they couldn't get the DNA from the samples at first. So what I would be interested to see is if we go back up and look, right? So on June 12th, 2023, once they got his DNA, they were able to go back and match those up, right? But if you remember when we were talking through, originally they were not able to generate further DNA analysis, right? So what it is leaving out here is that this time frame of it, how long were they not able to get a DNA sample? And then obviously they do get it July 31st, 2020, so that's a couple years before matching that DNA profile. But what happened in this area right here? And what I mean by that is, you know, a good lawyer and a good prosecutor, for that matter, are going to have to bring in experts to explain what happened there, because even in the affidavit, it confuses me a little bit. Like, you're saying that you couldn't get a DNA profile, so you sent it to a different laboratory, right? And I'm just talking through this. So you sent it to a different laboratory, and the different laboratory was able to come up with a profile. Now, the things that I would introduce as a lawyer is, what is the success rate of each laboratory? What was the first laboratory? And what are the chances that there could have been DNA transfer from other materials when it was transferring from one laboratory to another laboratory? These are all things that I think are going to pop up during this court case. Now, do I think this will get thrown out? I don't think so. I think this goes in front of the jury, and I think that if there's ever a smoking gun, I think this is what's going to be the downfall of Rex Humerman. However, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm interested to see in this. I want to see how this plays out, and I want to see how that plays out in court. So let's keep going down. We're We're going to talk about the arrest and search, and then I'll move on to a couple of the other cases. Appreciate everybody that's out there. I know this is a long one. I have never, I think, read through this many documents in an affidavit. Thus, why I didn't put all of this stuff into my video that I recorded. So just think about that. But anyways, on or about the evening of July 13th, 2023, defendant Rex A. Huerman was arrested by Suffolk County police officers. Search of his residence as well as other locations are currently ongoing. At the time of his arrest, defendant Huerman had on his person the burner cell phone, which was linked to the redacted email account used to conduct the online searches described above. Again, not a big deal there. I don't think that's going to do anything. Could be wrong though. We gotta wait for the context of this. Before I go on, just know an affidavit is usually a percentage of the stuff that they have that they'll present in court. So 6 months from now, 9 months from now, whenever he goes to court, I'll probably be eating my words there, but that's okay. If convicted on the current charges, defendant Rex A. Huerman faces multiple sentences of life without parole. Remand without bail is appropriate, so we're not going to go through that again. Basically, they just talk about how long he's been able to evade law enforcement and the serious nature of the crime. And then here was the big one. The recent sadistic and child pornography searches, use of fictitious names, email, and cell phone burner accounts. This is a big reason why they don't want to give him bail. Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't want to give him bail either. And again, he hasn't been charged for those other things yet. Not saying that he won't be charged for those, but they're starting off with the first degree and second degree murder in each one of these. So I'll just give you my closing thoughts on this case, and then I'm just going to talk about the other cases real quick, and then we'll close out there. It's just like the Richard Allen and the Kohberger case. A lot of evidence pointing their way, right? Again, I'll always say you're innocent until proven guilty. I think out of the three cases, and there's a lot of cases going on right now, obviously, like the Cabo 5, I'm still looking into that. Like there's a lot of things going on right now, but those are probably the three main cases that I continue to look at. This one has the most, or the closest thing resembling a smoking gun with the DNA evidence that's put in the affidavit. Again, well aware, not everything goes into the affidavit. The affidavit just needs enough to be able to secure, a suspect. And in some cases, if a suspect is, considered to be a danger to society, they're going to put more information in there to try to get them held without bond. And that's essentially what an affidavit does, right? It's not going to have all the information in there. And because it's in the affidavit doesn't mean it makes it into court either. So it works both ways, right? This is a long affidavit for this one. And I would say the first half of the affidavit, I think, is just words. I think that there's going to be a lot of confusion for a jury, especially when you get a specialist up there. I worked in telecommunications since 2001, starting in Canada at TELUS Mobility, and worked all the way through 2018 essentially. Worked for Verizon and then Sprint T-Mobile in the US, and I did the better part of Verizon for 12 years. And a lot of the stuff that's going on in this affidavit is a lot of lingo that your common everyday person, if they're not into the excitement of technology, is going to get lost in some of the things that were being said there. Some of it's simplified, but some of it is, I don't think, is even going to make it into court just based off of timelines, right? Like, referencing Tinder, versus Craigslist. Tinder didn't even exist until after the victims became victims. So I think a lot of that's going to get thrown out. I think the DNA is going to be very important. I think that a good lawyer is going to have to contest some of that DNA, and it really is going to come down to the DNA profiles of the first sample, and why was a profile not created? Why did it need to go to a secondary laboratory to have a DNA profile created? And was there different tests that were performed at each one of the laboratories? Also, a good lawyer is going to look and see the success rate. And what I mean by that, was there or any other cases in the time that these places have been open that has been fumbled, and then the experts are going to come in. Now, I think that will still remain in the case, and I think that will go to a jury, and ultimately I think that's going to be the downfall. A couple other things that I think is going to happen in this case. I think that out of the 10 victims that they say are out there, I think more are going to be connected to Humerman at some point. I say it in my video, but what's going on with Gilgo Beach? It'd be pretty scary if Rex Humerman is not responsible for all 10 of those folks. And I'm not implying that he is, because I don't know for sure, but they say that there are some males and females. So the ones that are in this affidavit are connected, based off of the sex trade. I don't know any of the facts on the other 6 that we've heard, or I guess it would be 5, because they have announced Shannon as well. But it'll be interesting to see if there's more charges laid during the time that they're waiting to go to court. And it'll be curious to see what the plea is going to be, or if there's any plea bargaining going on behind the scenes, because we know that there is, right? So I'll be interested to see that as well, see how that all plays out in court, if it does actually go to court, or if there's more bodies. Because one other thing that I brought up that we don't hear about in the news is that, obviously when that place was found December of 2010, I don't think people were going to go back, specifically if it's Rex Humerman was going to go back, was going to go back and bury bodies in the same place. So did he continue to do what he was doing but found a new place to bury bodies? Is there going to be a much higher body count than what we're seeing right now in this affidavit of 3? In the news, you're seeing 4. It's hard to say, right? And I think that they're all going to come out. And then I think some of the other things that you saw in there, specifically the child pornography stuff, I think is going to be like the ace in the hole. At the end of the day, he has not been charged with that yet. But if you see in the affidavit, they found stuff, and there's not a lot of context into how it was found or what it was, but it's obviously been mentioned in there 4 or 5 times, which means they've got enough to charge him with that as well. I just can't see the guy ever getting back out, but who knows, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this case goes. All right, I want to move on, and I thought one that was pretty interesting to me was Richard Allen and the confession, right? And I'm not going to hit this too long, but I think that a lot of folks up until this fact right here were basically thinking that Richard Allen is innocent, and I think people are still saying that. I still get comments on that. Again, I'm going to say, from my perspective, you are innocent until you're proven guilty. I think that there's a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case. I think that there's a lot of things that are coming out now that still, other than this confession, quote unquote confession, it's pretty interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this case plays out. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up was just to ask, what do you folks think? Like, what do you think that the phone call that was transcribed of him essentially confessing to the murders, do you think that will be the quote-unquote smoking gun? Because up until this point, it was hard to say. It could have went either way. Again, leave it up to a jury, right? Now, there was definitely some things that didn't look good for Mr. Richard Allen by any means, but there's still some unanswered questions that are going on here. Like, was there multiple people, which definitely could be the case. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, go back and check my videos on the case. I will do an update once we hear more information. But I don't know. It's just it's really interesting to figure out what's going on here. And if this is the case, is he going to plea out? Because if he's saying to his wife that he's guilty, he's got to know. He's got to know he's being recorded, right? I don't think anybody's living under a rock. Maybe I am. You're in jail. Everything you're doing is being recorded, right? So why would you say something like that? So I'm just going to ask. I don't have much more to say on this one. If he did confess, and he confessed to his wife and he confessed to his mother, do you think he's going for a plea deal right now? And why would he do that? Would it be to get the death penalty off the table? Would it be to, there's just so much stuff to ask here that I just don't know. But I was thinking, prior to this, I was actually thinking that he might get off. Because a big piece of evidence in the affidavit that we talked about was the bullets to the gun, right? But at that time, we didn't know how Libby and Abby died. We just knew that there was shells, because from what I understand, they were unspent around the bodies, right? And I don't know. It's just interesting. So we'll see what happens. I'm curious to hear from you folks what you think is going to happen with this case. Do you think he's going to take a plea deal if he's already coming out and reporting that he's guilty? Which, again, I don't think this will make it to a jury by any means. The case might make it to a jury, but this part I don't think ever makes it in there, right? I think they'd get that thrown out, but what jury member probably wouldn't have heard this already? So how would you get an unbiased jury? I'm not quite sure, but I'm curious to hear what you think is going to happen with Richard Allen. This one's pretty interesting. So, all right, and then the last one I want to talk about is Kohberger. So, a little bit different. I'm going to make a video on this. A lot of stuff going on with Kohberger right now, and I think that I hate to say it, he's the one that I'm 50-50 right now could possibly and potentially get off. I think that some of the moves that he's making in court are pretty interesting right now. I think that a lot of the evidence still points his way, no question. If you look at the arrest affidavit in there, there's no smoking gun in there. Again, no, I get it. It's not like Law and Order on TV, right? A prosecutor's job is not easy. They've got to prove a lot of stuff. They got to come in. They're going to have to prove timelines. They're going to have to utilize DNA. They're going to have to basically work through everything that they have in their affidavit. Based off of that affidavit, I don't think that convicts Kohberger at all. I think it was just enough to get him arrested. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised he's not out on bail based off of what was in there so far. And I hate to be the one that says that, but I think that this is the one that could potentially go sour. Now, my personal opinion, based off of everything that I've seen so far, it does point towards Kohberger, no question. But there's just a lot of stuff that's been left in the dark a little bit that I'm sure the authorities have and know. Because keep in mind, they said that there was almost 300 pieces of evidence. We only hear about 10 or 15 pieces in the affidavit. So when I say this, I'm choosing my words carefully because at the end of the day, they've got stuff that's probably smoking gun, that I quote unquote say that's smoking gun, that's going to put this guy away, right? But I am pretty intrigued on some of the things that he's doing. One, his lawyers really pushing the issue of having like gag orders, and then pushing the issue of subpoenas. I don't know if it is to make his case or if it is to intimidate some of the witnesses that are out there. Obviously this would be a very traumatic experience. I couldn't even imagine what the experience is like. I'll be just quite honest. If I was one of the roommates, I wouldn't want to testify in open court, and I definitely would not want to see the suspect that potentially was inches away from me leaving the building in court. That would freak me out. And so that leads me to believe, is that a strategy from the defense? Is that something that they want to do to intimidate, or is it something to discount what somebody has seen? I don't know. I'll be curious to see how the prosecutors, approach this case based off of the affidavit. Again, almost 300 pieces of evidence, right? So, we've seen like 15 pieces. Were they the most important pieces? We'll never know. The authorities aren't going to tell us until that comes out. So I think at this point, I do think it points towards Kohberger, but I do believe that the defense has a chance, and I think that, and you're going to see this in my upcoming video. I'll create a video around the attorney for Mr. Kohberger. Relatively unknown attorney right now, essentially doing public service, I think is going to be a name that blows up depending on how this case goes. Now, again, are they doing this to work on a plea deal? Because there's a lot of rumors that are out there too, like that maybe this wasn't the first time that Kohberger, committed these crimes. Maybe there's other folks in Pennsylvania that are tied to Kohberger, and that's all being investigated, right? And it's all rumors, and I get that. That's part of my job, is to kind of look at some of that stuff as well. But I'd be curious to hear what your take is on everything that's been going on. It's been relatively quiet, but I'm curious to see how that court case plays out. Now, there's a lot of other cases that are going on in the media right now. The last one that I want to hit, and maybe I don't know what to call her, right? I'm just curious. So this was interesting to me, and I'm going to leave it with this one because this is partially entertainment. Nothing really going on here. There is a lot of rumors. I've been watching this one on YouTube. This is more of a passion thing, but if you haven't seen it, I definitely would say watch it. Let's watch it together. I just want to make sure we don't get any background. All right, and you can see like everybody turns around and looks at this right away, right? This one's interesting because they haven't found the girl yet, and I've seen a lot of rumors on YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube myself, love YouTube. I follow a lot of folks, obviously. And the first rumor that I saw was that there was a guy that was sitting right behind her before she got up, and he looked at the passenger that was sitting beside her, and that passenger, instead of blinking up and down or vertical, was blinking horizontal. That was the first rumor that I heard. So basically insinuating that it was an alien that she was sitting by. The second rumor I heard was the guy in the green hoodie, which you'll see all over. And we don't know if she was sitting by him, whatever the case is, but the guy in the green hoodie had basically said he was going to take the plane down. I would say that if that was the case, and that was a serious threat, I am sure that we would have heard about it, because there's no way that plane is taken off if somebody made a threat like that, right? Especially if she's throwing a fit like this. I could be wrong. The third rumor I heard is that she was going on vacation to the Bahamas, so she hasn't been around social media since this happened, and this is why they can't find her, because there's a lot of people that want to interview her for sure. I'm curious to see what her story is. The one that I think is, could it have been staged? It most definitely could have been staged. This could be the stunt of all stunts. You think of like YouTube, you think of Twitch, you think of Kick, you think of any of the streaming platforms, or Rumble, any of the stuff that's out there today, and this is getting millions of views right now. If it was me doing this, I could probably get 2 or 3 million followers just based off of this video alone if I executed it like she did. So that's kind of where my opinion goes. And then the last one that's been, popping up quite a bit is that it's AI generated, right? Artificial intelligence. We're seeing that a lot on Twitter right now with the artificial intelligence stuff. Like it was all pre-made, utilizing like Chat GPT, things like that. Came up with the script and then, essentially made the video, so on and so forth. And again, that would be a great stunt as well, right? Because we know there's a lot of AI stuff. I use Chat GPT. I think it's a useful program for me. I use it both at work and personally. And Chat GPT itself wouldn't make this, but there's different AI programs that you can create live things like a person. So pretty interesting stuff. I'd love to hear from you folks. What do you think's going on with this one? This one I'm definitely monitoring and watching because I want to see what the backstory is on it. There's so many rumors out there that you could come up with any rumor yourself. It's likely to be one. Who knows? At this point, I don't lose any sleep over it because I really don't know what's going on with this lady, but it is definitely one that's drummed up the most interest in the last week, which I think is pretty interesting, probably followed by Rex Heuermann, that most people are watching from the true crime stuff. So that being said, I appreciate everybody tuning in to the live stream. I will have a video up on Wednesday, and if I am able to, I might be able to get one more video up by the end of the week. I know I've been slacking on the videos a little bit. A lot of stuff going on at work and in my personal life as well. All good, nothing bad, but it hasn't left me a lot of time for video editing and creating videos. It takes a lot of work to edit. Live streaming is a little bit easier, and I'll try to continue to do that. So I'm not making any commitments, but I do want to continue to grow the channel because at some point I would love to get monetized and be able to do this full time. As it stands right now, my full-time job has always got to take that first place, but as that's settling down a little bit, I'll get some time to create some more videos throughout the summer, and then going into Christmas as I work retail, it'll probably slow down again for a little while. But I do appreciate all you folks tuning in. Look for some comments down below. Hit that subscribe button as well. Let's grow the channel together. And if there's anything you would like me to talk about, or if there's anything you thought that I just absolutely got wrong, would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day, everybody.